After celebrating our wedding anniversary with my husband, I suddenly realized I had left my phone on the table. When I turned back, an old acquaintance stepped out from the shadows, caught my wrist, and whispered, "Don't make a sound. You need to see this. And whatever you do, stay calm." He showed me a video recorded from inside the restaurant. What I saw on that screen made my knees nearly give out because the man sitting across from me at dinner, the man who had just smiled, raised a glass, and toasted to our future, had slipped something into my drink. And in that moment, I understood that the dizziness, the memory lapses, the fog in my head that had haunted me for months had never been stress. I had been poisoned by my own husband. If you're here with me right now, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And tonight's story, this one still shakes me. Also, before we go further, please note that this story contains dramatized elements for storytelling and educational purposes. Some details have been adapted for narrative effect, but the emotional truth at the heart of it is very real. That night, I thought I was walking out of a beautiful anniversary dinner. I had no idea I was walking straight into the truth about the man I married. My name is Amelia Hart, and until that night, I believed I understood the life I had built. I owned Hart and Vine Estates in Charlottesville, Virginia, a vineyard and wine business my father had spent his entire life creating. He built it from almost nothing. Acres of stubborn land, years of debt, long harvests, bad seasons, good years, and eventually a name people respected. When he died, he left it to me. Not just the company, the responsibility, the history, the reputation. And for a while, I carried it well. Then Daniel Pierce came into my life. We had been married for 4 years. To most people, we looked ideal. He was polished, attentive, smart with numbers, and effortlessly charming in public. Daniel knew how to make himself look like the calmest man in any room. At home, he was affectionate in exactly the ways other people noticed, and just controlling enough in ways they didn't. He worked closely with me at Hart and Vine, officially managing financial strategy and expansion planning. Unofficially, he inserted himself everywhere. Banking calls, distribution meetings, investor conversations, vendor negotiations, insurance renewals, tax planning, risk management. And at the time, I thought he was being supportive. Looking back, I see something else entirely. He wasn't building our life with me. He was mapping out how to take it. For the 6 months leading up to our anniversary, something had been happening to me. I forgot meetings I had personally scheduled. I would open my laptop and stare at an email thread I did not remember writing. Twice I drove across the estate and forgot why I had gone there. Once, during a board call, I lost my train of thought so completely that I had to mute myself and pretend there was a bad connection. I started writing notes to myself and then forgetting where I put the notes. I missed a distributor callback that could have cost us a seasonal contract. I stood in my own tasting room one afternoon, looking at a wall of labels I had approved years ago. Then, and for 5 whole seconds, I couldn't remember the name of our flagship reserve. 5 seconds does not sound like much until it happens inside your own skull. Daniel always had an explanation ready. I was exhausted, overextended, burned out. He would put a hand on my shoulder and say it with such calm certainty that after a while I started repeating his words to myself. I need rest. I'm pushing too hard. I'm not myself lately. He was writing the script, and I was slowly learning to live inside it. He even started protecting me in front of other people. If I hesitated in a meeting, Daniel would smoothly jump in and answer for me. If I misplaced a document, he'd laugh gently and say, "She's been carrying too much. I keep telling her she needs a break." I thought he was covering for me, and I did not understand that he was rehearsing my decline in front of witnesses. On September 18th, our 4th anniversary, Daniel booked us a private table at Maison Celeste, the most elegant restaurant in town. Candlelight, soft music, polished glass, expensive wine. the kind of place designed to make every table look like a scene from a perfect life. He looked handsome in that practiced way he always did. Navy suit, crisp shirt, warm smile. He ordered for us without asking what I wanted, something I would normally have noticed and disliked, but that night my mind was already sluggish. He poured champagne. He toasted to us. I drank. And within minutes, the room felt slightly wrong. Not dramatic, not enough to cause alarm, just a subtle drift like my thoughts were moving through heavy water. That's when Daniel brought out a folder on legal papers. He did it so gently, so almost apologetically, that if I hadn't seen the truth later, I might still be explaining it away. He said he had been worried about me, said I had seemed forgetful, distracted, unstable, said that if anything happened to me, even temporarily, the company needed continuity. Then he slid the papers across the table and told me it was only a temporary transfer of authority, a safety measure, a way for him to step in if I needed time off. I remember staring at the signature line and feeling something cold move through me. I didn't sign. I told him not tonight. He smiled and folded the papers away like a patient husband willing to wait until his wife felt better. I know now he wasn't being patient. He was measuring how close I was to surrender. Dinner kept moving, because that's what horrifying nights do, and they keep pretending to be ordinary right up until the moment they split your life in half. The waiter cleared our plates. Daniel asked whether I wanted dessert. I said no because the smell of sugar suddenly made me nauseous. He touched my wrist and asked if I needed help standing. I remember hating that question and not knowing why. I remember walking through the restaurant feeling like the floor was slightly soft beneath my heels. I remember the cool air outside feeling too sharp against my face. And I remember one thought circling somewhere deep in my mind, not yet fully formed, like a bird trapped in a dark room. Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. Then I realized my phone was still inside. I turned back toward the entrance, and before I reached the door, someone stepped out of the dark and caught my wrist. I spun, heart slamming against my ribs, ready to scream. Then I saw his face. Carter Blake. Carter had worked with my father years before, first in cellar operations and later as a consultant whenever harvest logistics or specialty storage became too complex for the regular team. He knew our estate like family knew it, maybe better. He looked older than I remembered, but sharper too, harder. He didn't waste time. He just said, "Don't say anything. Watch." Then he held up his phone. The footage was grainy, filmed from across the dining room, but clear enough to destroy my life in under 10 seconds. Daniel looked over his shoulder, pulled a tiny vial from his pocket, and tipped a few drops into my glass. Then he slipped it away and smiled at me like a man in love. I think the first thing I felt was not heartbreak. It was physical shock. And my body knew before my mind accepted it. My knees weakened. My hands went cold. My skin felt tight. "No," I whispered, but it sounded stupid even to me. Carter held me steady and said, "This isn't the first time, Amelia." I looked at him. "How long?" He shook his head. "I don't know exactly. Long enough that he thinks you're ready." Ready. Ready to be declared unstable. Ready to sign away control. Ready to become a woman whose life could be taken from her with paperwork instead of violence. Carter handed me a tiny sealed sample vial. He said he had managed to collect residue from the rim of my glass before it was cleared. "Get this tested tonight," he told me. "Not tomorrow. Tonight. And whatever happens, don't let him know you've seen that video." His voice had the kind of urgency that leaves no room for denial. And I looked past him toward the valet lane where Daniel's car was already pulling around. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Carter's jaw tightened. "Because I've been watching him. Because your father trusted me. And because if you go home believing this is stress, you may not get another chance." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in Daniel's car pretending nothing had happened. He drove us home, glanced at me once or twice, and asked if I was tired. I said yes. He told me I needed to stop overworking. His voice was smooth, steady, kind. I sat there with the sample hidden in my purse and understood something that still sickens me to remember. Daniel wasn't guessing his way through this. He had done it enough times to know exactly what I would look like, how I would answer, how much pressure to apply, when to back off. This was not impulse, and it was a process. That night, I waited until he was asleep. Then I got in my car and drove to Richmond to see Dr. Ethan Cole. Ethan had worked with my father years earlier on fermentation chemistry and contamination testing. He was one of the only people I trusted enough to bring something this serious to without having to explain why I sounded half crazy while saying it. When he opened the lab door and saw my face, he knew something was wrong immediately. I handed him the vial and told him, "I think my husband has been poisoning me." Ethan did not comfort me. He didn't say maybe, and he didn't tell me not to panic. He ran the sample. At 12:40 in the morning, he gave me the first answer. The liquid in my drink contained a neuroactive compound capable of impairing short-term memory, slowing executive function, and disrupting concentration. On repeated exposure over time could make someone appear mentally unstable, disoriented, unreliable. It wouldn't kill me quickly. It would erode me. Ethan also told me something far worse than I was ready to hear. This was not something Daniel could have easily picked up on the street. The compound pointed to controlled industrial or research access. Daniel had help. I drove home, shaking, and called my younger sister, Sophie. She answered immediately, and before I even finished explaining, she went silent in the exact way people go silent when they've been holding back something terrible. Then she told me she had already been watching Daniel. At first, she suspected he was cheating. She'd been tracking his movements, call patterns, and private contacts for weeks, waiting until she had enough proof to come to me. What she found was so much worse. Daniel was involved with Vanessa Reed, a corporate attorney tied to Blackthorn Industries, a company that had made multiple quiet attempts to get close to Hart and Vine over the years. Sophie also uncovered draft medical notes prepared for a specialist consultation describing me as cognitively unstable and no longer capable of making sound operational decisions. Daniel wasn't just poisoning me. He was building a legal narrative around the poison. Then Sophie followed the money. That was when the floor really dropped out. Through a shell company called Pierce Hollow Consulting, Daniel had siphoned $5.9 million out of Hart and Vine over 14 months using fake vendor invoices, falsified advisory fees, and forged approvals. I stared at the records in disbelief. At first, I thought the money was the point. Then Sophie opened another folder and showed me the real center of the scheme. Blackthorn Industries had advanced Daniel $10.5 million under a private side arrangement. In exchange, he was supposed to deliver access to proprietary Hart and Vine assets, including our restricted reserve collection and the production records behind our signature legacy line. He had 9 days left to fulfill that promise. If he failed, he would owe the advance back plus another $3.5 million in penalties. In that instant, every part of Daniel's urgency made sense. The pressure over paperwork, the fake concern, the sudden insistence that I was slipping, the timing of everything. He was not just betraying me, he was cornered. And instead of confessing his financial ruin or facing the consequences of his greed, he decided to drug his wife, declare her incompetent, steal her company, and sell off the deepest parts of her family's legacy to save himself. If you've made it this far, comment the word truth down below. Because once the truth starts showing itself, every lie around it begins to collapse. And that is exactly what happened next. The next day, Carter took me to an old stone outbuilding at the far edge of the vineyard. Behind a hidden release inside a cabinet, he revealed a stairway leading underground. I had never seen it before. Down there, beneath my own land, was a sealed reserve chamber my father had kept hidden even from most senior staff. 320 bottles of private stock, rare vintages, experimental reserves, heritage lots, estimated value, $28 million. But The true treasure was in the center of the room, inside an iron box, a worn leather journal. When I opened it, I saw my father's handwriting on every page: fermentation timing, yeast behavior, barrel sequencing, aging notes, corrective variations, microclimate observations. It was not a simple recipe book. It was the living memory of how heart and vine became irreplaceable. The thing investors couldn't buy from a spreadsheet. The thing competitors could never recreate just by tasting the product. Tucked inside was a note in my father's hand. If anyone ever tries to take this from you, remember, they don't love the family. They love the harvest. I sat there holding that book and realized Daniel had never really been after me. Not in the way a husband should be after his wife. He had been after what stood behind me: my name, my inheritance, my father's work, the estate, the hidden value, the part of my life that had existed long before him and would have outlived him if he hadn't tried to poison it first. I asked Carter how he knew about the chamber. He hesitated, then told me my father had shown it to him years earlier, when he started worrying that Heart and Vine would one day attract the wrong kind of attention. He trusted you, I said. Carter looked at the shelves, not at me. He trusted me to protect what mattered if the day ever came. Then, after a pause, he added, "I just wish I'd moved sooner." That sentence stayed with me because it matched the one already growing inside my own chest. I should have seen sooner. I should have listened sooner. I should have questioned sooner. But regret is useless if it only folds you inward. So I let it harden into something else: resolve. That was when I stopped thinking about survival in the short term and started thinking strategically. If Daniel believed the drugs were working, that false confidence was the only advantage I had. So I called him the next day and played exactly the role he wanted. I spoke slowly. I sounded tired. I told him my mind felt scattered, that I couldn't keep going like this, and maybe he had been right. Maybe I needed him to step in. Maybe I was ready to sign. He bought it instantly. His voice changed in a way only someone listening for hunger would notice. He tried to sound gentle, but underneath it was excitement, relief, triumph. "We can take care of everything," he said. "You just need to rest." I told him I didn't want a scene, didn't want to discuss it over and over, didn't want to argue. And I told him if we were going to do it, I wanted it formalized at the upcoming board meeting so nobody questioned the legitimacy later. That was the perfect bait. Public, witnessed, clean. Daniel loved legitimacy, loved the appearance of clean process. He agreed immediately. In the days that followed, we moved fast. Ethan prepared the toxicology report. Sophie mirrored and backed up every financial record, message thread, private calendar, and communications channel she could touch. Carter worked with Marcus Reed, our head of security, to quietly move the real reserve collection and the leather journal to a private climate-controlled facility 37 miles away. We left decoys behind. From a distance, they looked convincing. Up close, they were worthless. The transfer happened after midnight. I stood at the edge of the loading bay and watched crate after crate disappear into the dark on an unmarked truck. Marcus supervised every movement like a military operation. No phones, no unnecessary conversation. No one outside the inner circle knew what was being moved or why. By 3 a.m, the room beneath the stone building had been refilled with staged bottles containing chemically doctored liquid, just convincing enough in color and body to fool anyone who wasn't truly trained. Daniel thought he knew wine because he knew numbers attached to wine. That was going to matter later. I also searched Daniel's private drawers while he was away and found what I was afraid of: additional vials, industrial packaging traces, and revised transfer forms paired with notes about presentation strategy in front of the board. I photographed everything and put it back exactly where I found it. There was also a second folder containing printouts of my recent so-called mistakes: missed call, delayed contract response, misplaced tasting notes, a spreadsheet of my failures, curated by my husband like evidence for a trial I didn't know I was in. Looking at it made something inside me go very quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a person stops being afraid. Then Sophie uncovered one last piece of the machine. Ryan Cole, our internal communications manager, was feeding Daniel information from inside the company. Instead of confronting him, we let him keep moving. We wanted him nervous enough to make a mistake. He did. One night, Ryan slipped into the old cellar believing he was about to verify the location of the hidden reserve for Daniel. Now we had cameras on every angle. Marcus and his team were waiting. Carter and I were in the shadows when Ryan entered the hidden room and opened one of the bottles. The second he smelled it, he knew something was wrong. Then the lights came on. He dropped the bottle. It shattered. Daniel was on speakerphone through Ryan's mobile, demanding to know what he was seeing. Carter picked up the phone and told him, "You're out of time." Ryan confessed within minutes. Daniel had planted him inside Heart and Vine long ago. He'd been feeding him schedules, security details, internal communications, and anything relevant to the hidden assets Daniel was hunting. Ryan also admitted Daniel had become increasingly frantic over the last week. He knew Blackthorn was pressuring him. He knew the deadline was closing in. And he knew if he didn't get what he promised, he would be destroyed financially. So he pushed harder. More pressure on the authority transfer. More urgency around my supposed health. More searching, more spying, more risk. Everything was recorded, everything. At that point, we had what we needed. Video evidence of the poisoning, lab confirmation of the drug, proof of the shell company theft, Blackthorn's side deal, psychiatric fraud, possession of the chemical, Ryan's confession, and a timeline tight enough to stand in court. Our lawyer, Julia Bennett, assembled everything into a clean legal package. Detective Maria Lawson agreed to attend the board meeting on September 27th with plainclothes officers. Daniel thought that meeting would make him untouchable. Public setting, witnesses, corporate guests, final signature. And he had no idea it would become the room where everything ended. The night before that meeting, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of changing my mind, but because I finally understood how much had already been taken from me. I walked through my house and saw every room differently. The kitchen island where Daniel had once leaned, laughing while we talked about harvest plans. The den where he sat with my father's old financial ledgers and said he wanted to help protect the business. The bedroom where I had slept beside a man who was dosing me and then listening to me apologize for forgetting things. I stood at the bathroom sink and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. My face looked sharper than it used to, more tired, but there was something else too, a steadiness I had not seen in months. I pinned my hair back and promised myself one thing. No matter what happened in that room tomorrow, Daniel would never again define reality for me. On the morning of September 27th, I walked into the boardroom carrying a slim, insulated case and a stack of evidence binders. Daniel was already there, along with Vanessa Reed and Blackthorn CEO Malcolm Crane. Daniel looked almost relaxed when he first saw me, until he realized I did not look sick, confused, or fragile. I looked awake. He tried to move quickly toward the paperwork, but I stopped him and said that before any signatures happened, I wanted to observe a Hart family tradition, a tasting. I placed 2 unlabeled decanters on the table. One contained real reserve wine from the hidden collection. The other contained a doctored decoy. They looked nearly identical. I poured both and asked the room a very simple question. Which one is real? Malcolm tasted and declared one stronger, more developed, more prestigious. Daniel agreed, pretending authority he no longer had. Vanessa lifted the second sample, frowned, and said something was wrong with it. Chemical. Harsh. Not wine. I looked at Daniel and said, "And you couldn't tell." That line landed harder than I expected. Not because it was clever, because it exposed the center of everything. Daniel had spent years attaching himself to Hart and Vine. He wore the language. He learned the pricing structures. He memorized the right phrases. He acted like a steward, but he was never of it. He never understood the soul of the thing he wanted to sell. He only understood leverage. Then I started laying it all out. The toxicology report, the restaurant video, of the draft psychiatric file, the forged authority strategy, the Pierce Hollow theft trail, the Blackthorn deal, the chemical vials, Ryan's recorded confession. Everything. Every page, every date, every amount. The room went from confusion to horror in under 3 minutes. One of our board members, a man who had known my father for more than 20 years, physically stepped back from the table when he saw the still shot of Daniel tipping liquid into my glass. Malcolm turned on Daniel almost immediately, furious that he had been sold authority Daniel did not legally possess. Vanessa tried to control the damage, but it was already too late. Daniel finally dropped the concerned husband performance and became what he really was: cold, furious, cornered. And he said I had already been slipping and he had merely accelerated what was happening anyway. That sentence was the first honest thing he'd said in months. Then I said the line Detective Lawson and I had agreed on: "It's time." She stood from the back of the room with 2 officers. Daniel was arrested right there in front of the board, Blackthorn, and the very people he thought would witness his victory. He did not go quietly. He tried first to bluster, then to threaten, then to pivot into legal language. He accused Sophie of hacking, accused Carter of trespassing, accused me of staging evidence. Maria Lawson let him talk for exactly 3 seconds before telling him he could save it for his attorney. When the handcuffs clicked shut, the sound echoed through that room in a way I will never forget. Not because it was dramatic, because it was final. For 6 months, Daniel had controlled the pace of my fear. In that moment, he lost control of time itself. Everything from there forward would happen to him, not through him. After that, everything moved quickly. Daniel was charged with administering a harmful substance: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and attempted corporate theft. Ryan cooperated in exchange for reduced exposure. Blackthorn backed away publicly and scrambled privately. The fraudulent side deal collapsed. Hart and Vine returned fully to my control. Emergency holds were placed on compromised accounts, and legal recovery began. But the hardest part came after the adrenaline was gone. The poison did not leave my body overnight. It took time for the fog to lift, time for my mind to feel fully like my own again, time for my body to stop bracing every time a floorboard shifted at night, time for me to understand that being manipulated does not make you foolish. It means someone weaponized your trust. Sophie stayed close. Carter did too, always steady, never asking for more than I could give. Marcus rebuilt security across the estate. Harvest went on. Barrels still needed checking. Grapes still ripened. Vines did not care that I had nearly lost my life inside my own marriage. In a strange way, that helped. The land kept moving. So I did too. Weeks later, I stood alone in the early morning between 2 vineyard rows and breathed in the cold air, damp soil, leaves, oak, rain still lingering from the night before. For the first time in months, my sense of smell felt sharp again, full, real. And I stood there crying in silence because I understood then that Daniel had not only tried to steal my company, he had tried to steal the way I experienced the world, and he had failed. There were still legal hearings ahead, still depositions, still accountants tracing what could be recovered and what had been burned away in Daniel's desperation. Some members of the media wanted to paint me as a brilliant strategist who took down a criminal husband in one elegant move. The truth was messier. I was not elegant. I was exhausted. I was angry. I was humiliated. I was relieved. I was grieving a marriage that had apparently never existed in the form I believed it did. I was relearning my own instincts. Some mornings I woke up strong. Other mornings I sat on the edge of the bed and cried before my feet hit the floor. And that is what recovery looks like when the person who hurt you lived inside your daily life. There is no single victory lap, just 1,000 tiny decisions to keep choosing yourself again. I went back to the hidden chamber 1 month later with Carter. Not because I needed to inspect the inventory, because I needed to stand beside someone who had known my father and tell the truth out loud. We opened the iron box. I touched the leather journal again. "I almost lost all of this," I said quietly. Carter shook his head. "No," he answered. "He almost lost his life trying to take it." I looked at him, and for the first time since this all began, I let myself believe that. Daniel had built his entire plan around the idea that I would continue doubting myself longer than he could continue lying. That calculation was his fatal mistake. Oh, if you've made it this far, comment clarity below. Not just because it helps the video, though it does. Comment it because sometimes clarity arrives like comfort, and sometimes it arrives like a blade. Either way, once it gets here, nothing stays hidden for long. What I learned from all this is not elegant, but it is true. Betrayal rarely arrives looking like betrayal. Sometimes it looks like concern. Sometimes it sounds like patience. Sometimes it comes with a warm hand, legal papers, and a gentle voice asking if maybe you should rest. That is why instinct matters. That is why the small fractures matter, the things that don't add up, the feeling that the room has shifted and you can't yet explain why. I once believed silence would keep the peace, that if something felt wrong but I couldn't prove it, maybe I should wait. Maybe I should be reasonable. Maybe I was just tired. I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect you from a person who is already building a system around your collapse. It only gives them more time. And when that person knows your routines, your fears, your pressure points, your private weaknesses, silence can become the very thing they count on most. Daniel thought he could poison my mind, steal my name, and sell my inheritance before I realized what was happening. He thought he could make me doubt myself so completely that I would help him do it. He was wrong about the most important thing of all. He thought I was alone. I wasn't. And in the end, that changed everything. Today, Heart and Vine is still mine. The reserve collection is secure. The journal is back where it belongs. Sophie now sits in every high-level decision meeting, whether she wants the title or not. Marcus still checks every access protocol like he's guarding a national archive. Ethan keeps pretending he is only the chemist, even though I know better. And Carter still walks the lower rows at sunrise sometimes, the same way my father used to. The vineyard survived. So did I. Not cleanly, not gracefully, but completely. And maybe that's the part I want you to carry with you most. Survival does not have to look beautiful to be real. Sometimes it looks like a woman sitting in a car with shaking hands and a hidden sample vial in her purse. Sometimes it looks like an exhausted sister behind 3 open laptops at 2 a.m. Sometimes it looks like old loyalty stepping out of the shadows at the exact right time. Sometimes it looks like a courtroom, a boardroom, a lab report, a broken bottle on a cellar floor. Sometimes it looks like standing in your own ruined certainty, long enough for a new truth to take root. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that intuition matters. Subscribe for more stories of betrayal, resilience, and survival. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Stay sharp, stay safe, and trust yourself when something inside you whispers that the story you're being given is not the truth.